please open to the book of Song of Solomon, chapter 7. And I'm going to begin with an apology. We're continuing our study through the book of Song of Solomon. And I really, truly wanted to get through chapter 7 and 8 tonight. But as I'm going through it, even though it's only 13 verses, there is so much rich material in here. And I told you that one of the reasons that I really love this book is I love the whole analogy of Christ in the church. It's not just the lead guy in the opera and the lead girl in the opera and the choir, the daughters of Jerusalem, but it's a picture of Christ, our beloved, our bridegroom, who is expounding on his love toward us, and he does it in so many unique ways. Some of them are really humorous because they're things that we don't say anymore. You remember your hair is like a flock of goats, and I told you I didn't know if somebody'd say, hey, thanks, or if I'd get slapped or something. Depends upon if they had a perm, I guess, I don't know. But he uses some, I'll say archaic terms because we're reading King James, but I couldn't finish both chapters unless you guys wanted to stay till midnight, and then you would go to sleep, right? So, chapter 7, I'm having too much fun in this book, learning more about the Lord's love for me and for you. And this first section of the chapter, we have a male in the opera describing his appreciation for the bride's beauty. And this is verses 1 through 9. And she responds by expressing her joy in him, her satisfaction of him. And we're looking at this dynamic, powerful book at the analogy of the love of the Lord for his bride, the church. And throughout this little book, we've been tracing the evidence of the love of the bridegroom for the bride. From the first time the shepherd looked on the shepherdess and his heart went out to her until the time they were united in marriage. We went on and we saw that they had some difficulty in their relationship, like most relationships do. And we're coming to that place tonight where they've resolved those difficulties and issues and drawn closer than ever before. So a beautiful picture of Christ reaching out to us in our desperate need, and the glorious union with him consummated in the marriage feast of the Lamb, which we'll get to celebrate. This is the third description of her beauty. We've seen it twice before where he's commenting and talking about different things in her life and about her that he just turns into poetry, beautiful poetry. And this section provides kind of a window into the intimate relationship between Solomon and his wife, and it shows how their love matured. You'll be able to see that tonight. You'll see a difference in some opinions here. So verses 1 through 9, Christ describes the beauty of his bride, the church, and expresses his love to her, to us. And then in verses 10 through 13, the bride, the church, expresses her great delight in him and the desire that she has of communion and fellowship with him. Now, this is one of my most favorite chapters, probably because I have a weird head, weird mind. So go ahead and put that up there, would you? This is the woman we're reading about. I was sitting there, I'm reading it, and all these things come into my head. So as we're going through these first 9 verses, you will see the description. And I have a friend who's a very good artist, and I would say, now draw this, and can you put in this, and can you put in that? And that's what he came up with. So if you read the chapter, you'll know what's going on, and we're going to read it now, so you'll see once again exactly what's going on. But in verse 1 through 9, again, the groom uses one beautiful figure after another to tell us about the bride that he loves so much. And it's wonderful to think about how much the Lord loves us, and I think it's something to meditate on. Something else to think about here, too, is that I think the Lord delights in us more than we delight in him. He's perfect, we're not, and we're going to see an example of that in this chapter, in that he will praise her and acknowledge her and say wonderful things about her 3 different times. She responds once. Because sometimes we get busy, don't we? We've got other stuff to do and places to go. But I think until we come into the presence of the Lord, we'll never fully appreciate him as much as he appreciates us. The Lord tells us, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not evil. Jeremiah 29:11. A lot of you know that verse. Unfortunately, Those who the thoughts are towards are often ignorant or they're doubtful. Maybe the enemy's put that in your head. I've shared it before. Oh yes, he loves everybody here except you. He likes you because he has to. You're one of his children. That's not true. That's a lie of the enemy. Okay? And what a wonderful thing to know that we're the object of his desire. Incredible grace. So he begins and he says, how beautiful are your feet with sandals, O prince's daughter. Those aren't really sandals, but they're not Nikes either, so I like them. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a skillful workman. So he compliments the bride on the beauty of her feet. Somewhat seems, at least in our culture, somewhat unusual, because feet are not the most beautiful part of a person. I know a lot of ladies who like to hide their feet, or they haven't been pedicured lately, and that makes it ugly or whatever. But this is something to think about. In Ephesians, it tells us we're to be shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. That's what we stand on. That's what we're going to wear. Part of the whole armor of God, Ephesians 6. And this is what we stand on, the gospel of peace. Not our own efforts, not our own works, not our own righteousness, but on the good news that comes from God about peace. Romans tells us how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel, who bring glad tidings of good things. So do you know what pretty feet are? According to the word of God, they're the feet that are bringing good news. You want beautiful feet? Share the good news with people. You'll have beautiful feet. Remember when Moses stood on holy ground, what did the Lord tell him to do? Take your shoes off, take your sandals off, depending upon what translation you read. He was on holy ground. Then when we get into the New Testament, we read about the prodigal son. And when he returned home, what does his father do? He put shoes upon his feet. You see, the difference is Moses represents or speaks of the law. And you're never going to be able to stand on the law. You're not perfect. You cannot fulfill the law. I know a lot of people try, and I say, congratulations, but you can't. You cannot fulfill the law. And we read in the Old Testament and the New Testament, if you don't do everything, dot every I, cross every T, you have not fulfilled the law. You failed in one part, you failed in all. It's a pass-fail test. It's not, well, I got 90% or something like that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You'll never be able to do it. You can't earn or deserve God's blessings. But if you come to the place where you've said, I need God's grace, I need God's forgiveness, and I need mercy in my life, then like the prodigal son, you'll experience the gospel of peace being placed on your feet. And as the church and as the bride, we don't stand on what we're able to do or what we can accomplish or how we behave. We stand on the finished work of the cross of Jesus Christ. We stand on what Jesus has done for us. We stand on the gospel of peace. The second part of that verse, he says, the curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a skillful workman. By the way, the muscle structure of the thighs is the strongest muscle structure in the entire body. It guards a woman's purity, and here we see the bride being loved and commended for her purity. Your navel is like a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. The navel is the center of your being. I mean, check it out. It's in the middle of your body, right? It's right there. And he's comparing it to a glass filled with wine. Wine in the Bible, symbol of joy. You should be filled up with that symbol of joy. There's some other things it speaks of here too. It speaks of independence. That's the spot where the cord was cut. You were completely dependent upon your mom till that time when the cord was cut. Once we were tied to the world system, but we've been freed by the Spirit of God. The cord between us and the world has been cut by the blood of Jesus Christ. We're no longer in bondage to the world. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. This is an odd thing to say. It seems that this is the first era in history where women are supposed to be skinny. When did this all start? During the 19th century. Not that long ago, okay? A little over 100 years ago. And it became valuable in our culture. In other times of history, women that were skinny were thought to be sickly, or they weren't all that they should be. And during the medieval period, the hardships and the things that accompanied those hardships, seeing a woman that was more voluptuous was obviously a sign of prosperity. You had enough to eat, and you're more likely to survive. So you're attractive. If you look at Renaissance paintings and older statues, you'll see that the women were, I debated all day about the words to use them, bigger boned, you know. I don't know. I don't want to get myself in trouble, but anyway, in ancient days, this was a beautiful thing to say. Again, I think I'd probably get slapped. Hey, your belly looks like a heap of wheat. Or the thing that guys do way too often. So, when are you expecting? Don't even go there. You will get in trouble. Interesting thought, in the Old Testament times, Israel is likened to trees, fig tree and olive tree, cedars of Lebanon, standing strong, unbreakable, immovable. But here the bride, the church, is likened to wheat. And I have actually become concerned that a lot of the church sees herself as a tree, planted firmly, deeply rooted, and they don't want to go anywhere, they don't want to change anything, except sometimes she thinks she's been called to change the world system, politically, governmentally, and economically. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. We do things a little different. We are meant to be cut down, like wheat is always harvested, and carried away to the king's granaries and barns. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes like the pools in Heshbon, by the gates of Beth-rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon. I don't know how that would go over with a lot of women these days either. Hey, like your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon. What are you trying to tell me? The neck is compared to an ivory tower. This is usually a reference to where people are happily cut off from the rest of the world. Are you up in your ivory tower? Are you dreaming? Are you? It's a privileged seclusion and separation, a place where you think and where you learn. Colleges and universities are often called educational ivory towers. And then he goes on and says, your eyes are like fish pools in Heshbon. During the reign of King Solomon, Heshbon was part of the inheritance given to the Levites. You remember they had several cities throughout Israel where they could have times with their families that they're away from the work at the temple in Jerusalem. But it was a refuge for the families of the priests. It was a beautiful city. You can look it up. It was a very powerful city of peace. And for the bride to have her eyes compared to the fish pools in Heshbon would bring a totally different image to the ancient Middle Eastern mind than it would to ours. It would bring thoughts of beauty, because Heshbon is beautiful, thoughts of power, thoughts of peace, and a heart to understand and build. Perhaps when you think of a fish pool, you think of a clear fish pool, and maybe it's got a tint of green or blue to it. Maybe her eyes were colored that way, I don't know. But then he goes on with your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon. Things have changed in the way that we express things or share things. These are literally highly romantic and poetic expressions. So you may want to meditate on the words of the Lord towards you and what they mean here. Take time to look them up. It's a lot of fun. Now, in the book of Leviticus, under the law, if a man had a flat nose and it wasn't sticking up like the Tower of Lebanon, you could not participate in the ministry. It was part of the law of Moses. Leviticus 21:18. Symbolically, this speaks to the fact that those who are effective in service can't be tricked or seduced by every wind of doctrine or theological fad that comes their way. Rather, they've developed a spiritual sense of smell in order to discern when things are amiss, when something doesn't smell quite right. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. The king is held captive in your tresses. Now, your head is majestic like Mount Carmel. How many of you have been to Mount Carmel? One of my favorite spots in Israel. And I think I've shared this with you before, but the reason I like to go there is we visit for a short time, but you can see almost the entire country of Israel. You start up at the top, Mount Hermon, and you come on down, and you've got the valley of Jezreel before you. You've got the brook Kishon, where Elijah destroyed the prophets of Baal. You've got Nazareth, you've got Nain, you've got Mount Tabor, you've got Gilboa, and you can see all of this clear around to the Mediterranean on a clear day. And he said, you're majestic like Carmel, a beautiful spot, a wonderful place to go. And Carmel literally means the vineyard of God. Your head's like the vineyard of God. Well, that's a good thing. You can see so much. But Corinthians teaches us that hair speaks of submission. 1 Corinthians 11:15. And in Solomon's day, people considered purple threads most beautiful, precious, and regal. So purple hair typifies one who's royalty or submitted to the king. Interesting, today a lot of girls have purple hair. I used to wonder why. Now I know I'll never figure it out, so I have dispensed with that. But I don't think it means the same thing as it did in antiquity. Today I see blue hair and green hair and all kinds of shades of hair. So, how fair and how pleasant you are, O love, with your delights. This stature of yours is like a palm tree, and your breast like its clusters. And even today we speak of the grace of palm trees. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of its branches. Let now your breast be like clusters of the vine, and your fragrance like the fragrance of your breath like apples. In other words, you don't have bad breath. Your breath smells okay. I don't think I'd walk up to somebody at first meeting and do that either. Hey, your breath smells like apples. The palm tree, though, it gets more beautiful as it gets older. It gets more fruitful as it gets older. It is, as far as I know, the only tree that produces more fruit as it ages than it does when it's young. So you might be getting up in years. Your usefulness or your faithfulness doesn't need to be diminished. Those that are older will be able to be like the palm tree, increasing in wisdom. You have greater experience to be able to share with people. You've tried stuff that they haven't tried yet, and you know some of the things that work and some of the things that will get you in trouble, and you can pass those things along. You're increasing in wisdom, you're more powerful, and prevailing in prayer, you're more stable in your walk in the Spirit. The roof of your mouth is like the best wine, and the wine goes down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of sleepers. In other words, the kiss we exchange wakes me up. It's a sweet thing to me. So, again, meditate on these passages. We could break down each one of these things a lot further than I've gone. Just wanted to give you a taste and hopefully something that would make you hungry for some more. That you would spend some time looking these things up. I mean, look up the city of Heshbon and see what it was really like. You know, it was a Canaanite city. It became a city of another group of people. Then it was given to Solomon. Then it was given to one of the tribes. So it's an interesting thing when you go through these things. But wonderful truths that speak about how Jesus looks at you and looks at me, his bride. And now she's going to respond. She's listened to his expressions of love. Her heart's assured. She has the sense of restoration. You remember the last time we were together, we talked about the fact that they were having difficulties in their relation. And I had mentioned that he never said to her, why didn't you respond? Why didn't you come when I called? He never does that to her. He always just says, I love you. He's always kind. He's always sweet. And she is receiving that and understanding that. And she's reassured and has the sense of restoration and fellowship. And she answers in verse 10, I am my beloved's, and his desire is towards me. In other words, he hasn't turned against me. He hasn't gone away. When we turn from the Lord, oftentimes we feel like he's turned from us. He hasn't. He's still there. I will never leave you or forsake you, his word says. He loves me. Christ desires me. And sometimes that's hard to comprehend. Why would God love me? I mean, I know what I'm like. I like what Spurgeon said. He knew me before the foundations of the earth, and he chose me anyway. Would you choose you? if he allows us to go through trials, it may be to test us, to see if there's genuine repentance for sin. Sometimes he may allow trials just to draw us close. I think I've shared that with you before, where I've been so busy trying to serve the Lord that I haven't spent the time with the Lord. And I'll end up on my back looking up and I'll go, Lord. And he goes, hi, good to see you. Haven't talked in a while. I missed you. So yeah, I tripped you. Just so you would look up. Just like Joseph did with his brothers. He didn't immediately reveal himself to them. He wanted to find out where they stood. Were they still wanting to get rid of him? Did they realize what happened after they sold him to the Ishmaelite caravan? Did they understand that this man before them now was their brother, who God had planned good, not evil? They planned evil, but God planned it for good because he wanted to preserve and provide for his people. So, notice the bride is maturing. 3 times in the books we have this similar expression to this. I am my beloved's. In chapter 2, she said, my beloved is mine. In chapter 6, she says, I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. Chapter 2, it's mine. The next time, I'm his, but he's mine still. You ever hear little kids do that? That's one of the first words they learn, isn't it? Mine. Everything is mine. Now here in chapter 7, I am my beloved's. He owns me. I belong to him. He's the Lord of my life, period. I'm not trying to claim him, to control him, to manipulate him. I've learned a lot of things the hard way. I've wandered off. I've slept in. I didn't answer his knock. I didn't respond to his call. And I'm learning how much I need him. He's my passion. He's my motivation, my everything. I'm his. And I found out that he doesn't exist to make my plans come to pass. That's shocking for a lot of people as they grow in the Lord. Comes a time in your walk when you're no longer trying to manipulate God, where you don't call on God just to see what he's got for you. Can you get me out of this situation, Lord? Can you take care of this situation, Lord? Can you give me more money, Lord? Can you give me a new car, Lord? Oh, he can do all of that and more. But is that why we go to him? Is that our motive? Is that our purpose? To make deals? You ever done that with the Lord? Lord, if you do this, I'll do that. I always did that when I was younger in the Lord. Lord, if you answer this prayer, I will make it to church every Sunday for the next 6 months. Is that a deal? Why aren't you just going to come and fellowship with brothers and sisters, coming to learn more about me, coming to draw closer to me? You ever done that? Don't raise your hands. Certain ministries that we hear on the radio and on television that grieve my heart, they try to force God to do their bidding. You know, the health and wealth doctrines. That's wrong theology. It's not biblical. It's not Christ-like, and you need to be aware of it. You need to stay away from it. Don't get sucked into it. God is not a cosmic Santa Claus that I go and collect presents from. He's not only there to meet your demands. Actually, we are to be his servants. We are to do what he wants us to do. And I pray that we would have noses like the Tower of Lebanon, that we can smell fraud when it comes up. It's grieving when the church is taught to make demands of God like he's a genie in the bottle. He is God. You are not. We are his servants, not the other way around. Now, again, before the bride is saying, my beloved is mine. Now she's saying, I am my beloved's. I am his. I belong to him completely. What a picture of maturing and a picture of submission and dependence on the Lord. You can see the sweetening in her life, the softening in her walk. I belong to him. I'm his. He has captured my heart. And what he's done causes me to say, like Paul did, Lord, I'm your bondslave forever. You know, there were times I worried about if I become his bondslave, then maybe I won't get everything I need. Are you kidding me? He's the most gracious master in the world. I will love you. I will care for you. I will give you everything you need. You don't have to worry about a thing. Every doubt, every fear is gone. She found her satisfaction in him, and he finds his in his bride. So it's a beautiful picture of communion between Christ and the Savior. It's not only a picture, is it a reality in our lives? That's the question for each of us. Isn't it a fact that we so often do what the Shunammite did? We turn a deaf ear to the bridegroom's voice, like earlier in the book. We're too busy to pay attention to him or spend time with him. Do you know you can even be so busy in Christian service that you use the excuse of, I'm serving him, I'm busy for him. And he's saying, just sit down, talk with me. Or like earlier in the book, come away with me. You remember what she said? I'm fine, you go skip on the mountains, I'll catch up with you later, Lord, Master, Lover. It's easy to be busy preparing for a study to give to others. It's another thing to sit down in the presence of the Lord, open the book and say, please feed me. You make the best meals, Lord. There'd be a difference between Mary and Martha. They both loved him, but one was busy serving while the other knew when to sit at his feet. And I pray that you'll never be content with the knowledge of salvation or content with serving him in some measure. Remember that there's something that means more to him than all your service. That's you. He loves you that much. That's to sit at his feet. That's to delight your soul in his love. So read through chapter 5 again and you'll see the vast difference between that chapter and this. It will remind you of the fullness of Christ as you read the bride's description of her bridegroom. And I would that we would have hearts that would be so occupied with him that we would lose sight of everything else. Remember we sang that song, Have Thine Own Way, Lord. Have Thine Own Way. When I see the Lord, the things of the Lord, the things of the world grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Christ alone would satisfy the longing of our soul. Verse 11, come, my beloved. This is her speaking now. Let us go forth to the field. Let us lodge in the villages. This is something he talked about before when she said, I'll catch up with you. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine is budded. I want to see if there's fruit. Let's see whether the grape blossoms are open and the pomegranates are in bloom. There will I give you my love. So this time she says, I'm ready to go. I'm yours. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I want to go with you. And I'd like to take you. You remember in the first part of the book, she despised the fields. I had to work in the fields. I was doing the work for my siblings. I'm dark because I've been out in the sun. I'm sunburned. And now she's saying, let's go back to the fields. Let's go back to the villages. I want to take you there now. I want to introduce you to the people of my home. That's the hardest place to witness, isn't it? Remember, the disciples were called to go first to Jerusalem, to Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. Jerusalem was their home. That is the toughest place. People know what you're like there. They know if you're phony or not, and they'll call you on it. Then Judea and Samaria, areas that are surrounding, and then even to the uttermost parts of the world. I love that. She says in verse 13, the mandrakes give off fragrance. You remember mandrakes, we read about them in Genesis 30, symbols of passion and fertility. The mandrakes give off a fragrance. And at our gates are pleasant fruits, all manner of new and old, which I've laid up for you, my beloved. Again, chapter 1, she despised the fields. Chapter 7, she wants the king to go with her. Do you remember in Gadara, Jesus healed a man that was full of demons. And he said, Lord, I want to go with you. I want to be wherever you are. And you remember Jesus said to him, go back to where you came from. Go back to your family. Go back to your friends. Go back and let them see the changes that have been made in your life, the difference in your life. Go to your family and friends to see the glorious work of God. And there are times when we feel like it would be wonderful to follow Jesus to Africa or China, or maybe the Lord will call me to Hawaii. That would be a tough mission journey. But there comes a point, I think, in your maturity where you are ready to go back to the people that you used to party with, the people that you used to hang out with. You want to go back and find those people and let them know what God has done. Sometimes you want to go back home to your parents and apologize for what you've done. or perhaps be a witness to them of what the change is in your life now. I had some parents one time call me up and say, hey, what's going on with our kids? They're gone all night. I said, we're at Bible study. They go, yeah, well, what's the difference? I said, well, they're praising the Lord, learning scripture. They said, look, before they used to skip out of the house. They wouldn't clean up the dishes. They wouldn't clean their room, and they wouldn't take out the trash. Now they're going to Bible studies, and they still skip out on the dishes, and they still don't take out the trash, and they still don't clean up their room. So what's the difference? It was a matter of maturity. It was a matter of growth. And in time, they were able to go back and share with those parents. Now, I'm not discounting being sent out, but I believe there comes a time in your maturity when you realize the mission field is all the way around you, beginning at your home, and then going to the uttermost parts of the world. There's an old missionary saying, I believe, that is true, and I really like it. It says, there's no sense going across the ocean if you won't go across the street. Have you gone across the street? Does your neighborhood know what you believe? Does the neighborhood know that there's something different in your house than is what's going on in a lot of other houses in the neighborhood? I've shared this story several years back, but this is a true story. A woman named Sophie. She was a scrub woman at the turn of the century in New York City, and she loved the Lord. And she said, Lord, I want to be a missionary. I want to go to China. I want to go to Africa. And the Lord spoke to her heart. She lived in a tenement building, and the Lord spoke to her heart and said, who lives on the floor above you? And she goes, I don't know. I want to go to Africa. Who lives on the floor below you? I don't know. Can you take me somewhere? He goes, why don't you start with them? Why don't you minister to them? Why don't you see if they know me? Why don't you share your love for me with them first? And then we'll see where else you might go. So there's no sense going across the ocean if you won't cross the street. Is your neighborhood being affected? Is the atmosphere in your workplace changing because you're there? Witnessing to people, loving them, encouraging them, praying for them? The most difficult place, again, is at home. Jesus told us, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country or in his own home. And that's why the bride shows great maturity when she said, I'm ready to go back home. I want to take you with me. You've brought this about, the new and the old. I love the New Testament. I love the Old Testament. I love the new works of God, but I love the old paths Jeremiah talks about. And I want to share those things with all that I know. We're going to stop there this evening. Lord willing, next week we will complete the book of Song of Solomon. Would you all stand with me and join me in a word of prayer?